Alright, hi everyone, how's it going? And welcome to another video. Now I want to do another movie review today, and the movie that I'm going to be reviewing is Rambo 5 Last Blood. Now there will be some spoilers in this video, so if you haven't seen it, there's going to be some spoilers, so spoiler alert. But I decided I would do a movie review on this because I have seen the other movies in the Rambo franchise, and I thought I would talk about it, but I'm also going to talk a bit about the Rambo franchise as a whole. So, now Rambo is based on the 1972 novel First Blood. In 1982, they made it into a movie starring Sylvester Stallone as Rambo and Brian Dennehy as the sheriff. And I did want to talk a bit about that because at the time Rambo came out in the early 80s and also in the late 70s, you had a lot of this sheriff going after the outlaw kind of movie, right? You had a lot of that. You had that with Convoy, where you had the sheriff Lyle, played by Ernest Borgnine, going after Rubber Duck, played by Chris Christopherson. You also had this with Smokey and the Bandit, where you had Sergeant Buford T. Justice, played by Jackie Gleason, going after that Burt Reynolds character. Also the Dukes of Hazzard, you had that too. The sheriff going after the outlaw. And if you think about it, that's a very old story. That's like the Sheriff of Nottingham going after Robin Hood. You also have this in the Old Testament as well. You have this kind of story. So this is a story that really goes back thousands of years. But, you also have it in present time with, the sheriff going after the outlaw. Same kind of story. Now, with the movie First Blood, it starts out the Rambo character, and he's referred to as John Rambo. In the novel, he's just called Rambo. But this Rambo character goes to see a friend of his in this mountain town. Probably, I'm not sure if they mention where it is, actually. It looks like the Pacific Northwest or British Columbia, somewhere around there, but, they don't really get into that from what I can recall. So I always assumed it was like the Pacific Northwest, like Washington State. Anyways, it's this mountain town, and Rambo's friend had recently died of Agent Orange, and Rambo is walking through this town. He gets stopped by this sheriff, and the sheriff then takes him to the end of town, and he hopes Rambo would just leave. However, Rambo doesn't leave, and he walks back into the town. Now the sheriff kind of gets mad, and this is where I always kind of felt there was sort of a failure to communicate here. Felt that Rambo, being a ex-Green Beret, which he was, probably could have formed some kind of a bond of some sort with this sheriff, because they kind of had a common bond. They had like a similar experience. The sheriff was supposed to be a Korean War vet, but yet there was no communication between the two, nothing, and the problems just escalated. The sheriff ends up arresting Rambo, bringing him to the station. They try to put him in a cell. Eventually Rambo fights his way out, and of course they find the Rambo knife, or like a survival knife, which Rambo does not have in the book. In the movie he does. Anyways, Rambo then escapes into the mountains, and they begin this manhunt after Rambo. Now, in the novel, from what I understand, similar things happen, but Rambo is much more violent in the novel. In fact, Rambo ends up killing about 15 to 20 people in the novel, as where in the movie, as far as I know, the only one who dies is the sheriff deputy when Rambo throws the rock at the helicopter and it loses its stabilization and the guy falls to his death. That's the only person that I recall dying in the movie. But yeah, much more violent character in the novel. And also in the novel, you kind of have this back and forth between Rambo and the sheriff. So it's kind of like the story from their point of view. It'll be like a chapter of Rambo's point of view, then a chapter of the sheriff's point of view. And it's kind of this like back and forth kind of thing, which is kind of amusing how they did that. And you learn a bit more about the sheriff in the novel. And the sheriff comes off a bit more heroic in the novel, as where in the movie he comes off as being more like a bully. But yeah, the whole thing sort of accumulates in the showdown between the two of them, between Rambo and the sheriff. Now, in the novel, it gets real violent. They both shoot each other, and essentially they're both dying. But I believe the sheriff dies first, and then Rambo ends up getting killed by his old military commander, Troutman, or Troutman shoots Rambo in the novel. In the movie, Troutman and Rambo are much more buddy-buddy. You know, they're much more buddy-buddy. They're like friends in the movie. But in the novel, you know, Rambo, like, doesn't even really seem to remember Troutman. They don't really seem to have much of a connection at all, you know, and they're more opposed to one another in the novel than they are the movie. So, anyways, in the movie, it's kind of revealed that Rambo ends up, you know, walking away with Troutman. Rambo talks about some of the difficulties that he's had trying to adjust to civilian life. You know, Rambo definitely has what you would now call PTSD, although at the time they called it Vietnam Vets Syndrome. So, now apparently what was going to happen was originally they were going to have Troutman shoot Rambo in the movie, and that would have ended the whole franchise right there if Troutman killed Rambo in the movie. They decided to get rid of that part. I guess they had it in there because initially the movie was like 3 hours long, and Stallone hated it. He wanted to torch the whole movie. He didn't like how it turned out. They eventually edited quite a bit of it, and then they got it down more to his liking. And then the movie came out, and the movie was a surprise hit. It cost $15 million to make, and it ended up making $150 million at the box office. So it was a hit. Then, after that, you had Rambo 2, which Stallone co-wrote with James Cameron. And Rambo 2 was a huge hit. It did $300 million at the box office. It made its way into pop culture. Now, I like Rambo First Blood, the first Rambo movie, the most. But I did like Rambo 2 as well. I thought it had a pretty decent story with Rambo going after POWs still believed to be in Vietnam and rescuing them. I liked that plot. You know, and then after Rambo 2, like I said, the Rambo 2 was a huge success, and it was all over pop culture. I mean, there were parodies of it. There were, you know, all kinds of different things involving Rambo 2. And I remember when it came out in 85, it was a big film. Then you had Rambo 3. And Rambo 3 I did not like. Didn't care for Rambo 3. Rambo 3 came out in 1988. It was written by Stallone and Sheldon Lettich. Now, Sheldon Lettich would write a much better film in 1988, and that, of course, was Bloodsport, which I did a movie review of a while back. But that was a much better film than Rambo 3. I didn't like Rambo 3. I just didn't think it was a good movie. And they went years without coming out with a Rambo film. Then finally, they came out with Rambo 4. And Rambo 4, I didn't have high hopes for the film. I didn't think I was going to like it at all. There were a lot of jokes about Stallone at this point. You know, is Stallone going to be in a wheelchair? And you would hear, you know, the media making a lot of jokes about that. So I didn't have high hopes for Rambo 4. Then I saw it and I really liked it. I thought Rambo 4 was a good film. I really did. It was really surprised me quite a bit. Now, Stallone had come out with Rocky Balboa a couple years before, and I did like Rocky Balboa, so I thought maybe, I would give the Rambo movie a chance, and I ended up liking Rambo 4. I thought it was good. Even the guy who wrote the original First Blood novel in 1972 liked Rambo 4. He thought it was good as well. And supposedly the original author of Rambo and Sylvester Stallone were going to begin working on Rambo 5 together. They were talking about what they wanted to do. They had all these ideas. Eventually their ideas ended up getting scrapped by the producers. They didn't want to go with their ideas. Instead, they had this strange idea of having this genetically enhanced creature that was terrorizing the Arctic Circle and escaped from this laboratory run by these renegade scientists, and escaped from this laboratory and was headed south, and Rambo and some other guy were sent to go after this thing. Eventually, that whole plot ended up getting scrapped, and they went with something a lot similar to the plot of Taken with Liam Neeson. It's a similar plot, so that's where I get into Rambo 5. And again, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, there will be spoilers. Anyways, it starts out Rambo's on this ranch in Arizona, which is where he lives. He has a niece. They don't really explain too much about the relationship between Rambo and his niece and all that, and who this other woman is. They don't really get into a lot of that. So I thought that was pretty weak. And then they have it where his niece goes to try to find her dad, who's living in Mexico. She wants to find out why he left their family. And while doing all this, she goes to a club where she's abducted by sex traffickers. Rambo finds out about this. Rambo's furious. He goes to rescue her. Now, he goes to rescue her, and he finds out where she is. These guys, these sex traffickers, beat up Rambo, but eventually Rambo ends up finding her and saving her. He brings her back, but she dies of her wounds on the way back. She had been wounded pretty badly. Rambo then goes back to his house. The sex traffickers find out where he lives. They go after Rambo, and not surprisingly, Rambo's a bit of a prepper. That comes as no surprise. Rambo has all these tunnels dug and all these booby traps in these tunnels, and these guys go after Rambo, and he ends up killing a whole bunch of guys one after another, with these, booby traps. They kind of have it where, no one's able to really give Rambo a good fight. In fact, in most of these Rambo movies, no one is ever a match for Rambo, except for maybe one of the Russians in one of the sequels. But, yeah, no one could really match Rambo. And, he pretty much kills all these guys, and it sort of ends up with Rambo facing off with this cartel leader, where he shoots him with these arrows, and then Rambo takes his Rambo knife and cuts the guy's heart, grabs it, pulls it out, and shows it to him before he dies. I thought that was like a parody. That reminded me of a parody of a Rambo film. In fact, it reminded me a lot of what you had in the Weird Al Yankovic film UHF, where they parody Rambo. It reminded me a lot of that. But it really seemed like a parody of itself. A parody of Rambo in a Rambo film. All in all, I did not like Rambo 5. I thought it was pretty weak. I thought it was just, nothing really spectacular about it. I know some people did like it, and they liked the action sequence at the end of the film. They thought it was really action-packed, especially at the end. And yeah, it was, but the deaths just seemed phony. They were these like CGI booby trap deaths that, I just didn't care for. I mean, people have been referring to this movie as a Rambo Home Alone film because it has all these booby traps and stuff. And, it almost kind of does seem like that. Really seems like kind of a parody of itself at this point. Yeah, I did not like this film. It kind of gave me kind of a bad feeling at the end of it. Almost like, I don't know, like it was kind of anti-intellectual in a way. I just didn't care for it. The other Rambo films were certainly better than this, although I will say I like this one more than Rambo 3. But, yeah, I didn't really care for this Rambo film at all. Like I said, thought it was a pretty weak film, and I know critics haven't been crazy about it. Some fans have liked it. If you like the Rambo films, I don't know, maybe you'll like it. But it just didn't seem like there was a whole lot there. Like I said, it was very much the whole Taken plot in a lot of ways. But, except, of course, the ending where Rambo ends up killing all these guys with these booby traps. I will say this, though. Stallone, although he is much older now in this film, he still comes off very intimidating in some scenes. Like that scene where he confronts his niece's father, that one girl's father, and it's just, he means business, and he just comes off very menacing. But, yeah, as a whole, I didn't care for it. I think this, I don't even know if this will be the end of the franchise, because I could almost see where they probably might do a prequel in the future. A prequel, if well done, could possibly be a good movie. They would have to cast a younger actor to play Rambo, but I think a prequel might actually work. That's the only thing I could see with this franchise. As far as continuing it with another movie, no. But a prequel possibly, if they had a good script, might actually work. They might actually be able to pull that off. But yeah, anyways, that's my take on Rambo 5. Like I said, I did not like it. Usually when I do these movie reviews, I like the movie because that's why I did a movie review on it. I did a movie review on it because I liked the movie and I wanted to talk about it. But that was not the case with the 5th Rambo movie. I did not think it was that good at all. So, yeah, if you watch this video, as always, I do thank you for watching. Hope you got something out of this movie review. But anyways, I do thank you for watching. Have a good night.